Welcome to the pregame show presented by Matt Bowers Auto Group. Lord willing, we're going to find a way to talk for 30 minutes about this Saints and Raiders game. I don't know what to say about this one.
Is this the Matt Bowers Bowl between 6 and 6?
Matt Bowers is a born winner, and this game is not a game between born winners. So definitely not the Matt Bowers Bowl. Matt Bowers would be putting his name on a game between two good teams. Not
That's
this
a really good point.
Yeah.
Plus, this is way too late in the bowl season for a game this bad. Like,
yeah,
this is more of a December 12th game.
It'd be like the Matt Bowers Sugar Bowl. Like, that's the status Matt's at. He's not at.
No,
he's
I
not
agree.
At this. He's not at this. So, yeah, I don't know what to expect from this one. Spencer Rattler versus the one-legged Raiders. I guess starting out, I mean, he's in the spotlight. It's Spencer Rattler's showcase. It's continued. What are you expecting to see from him in his fifth start?
I think the level of opponent, the fact that the Saints should be able to run the ball, keep the score close. I think we'll see a real game. Last week we didn't see a real game. Now, Spencer Rattler was lousy last week. Part of the reason it was 17-0 so quick was because he was not playing well. So I'm not making excuses for him. But I just think now he's going to get 4 quarters to have some of the highs we've seen and some of the lows we've seen.
Yeah, I'm not expecting a whole lot from him today just because I think it's going to be impossible for him to succeed here today. Still don't have any of your receivers. MVS is back. He'll be playing, so that helps a little bit. Still don't have Taysom Hill. Alvin Kamara isn't going to play until next week. So I think it's another tough day for him. There's not a lot of help here. You don't have your center. You don't have your guard. Uli Udoh's going to start at guard. Shane Lemieux at center. I just don't think that it's conducive to success. Now, granted, you're playing a terrible team. They're coming off a win, though. They're actually favored in this game against the Saints, a home game. I think they're favored by 2 now, which says a lot about where this team's at, and I can't disagree with that. I don't expect the Saints to win today. I think they're actually going to lose this game today.
Yeah, I would not bet a single dollar on who's going to win or lose this game. I think the Raiders are trying to win. As you mentioned, we saw them wildly celebrating when they blew the first pick in the draft last week by beating the Jaguars. So, Antonio Pierce is fighting to try and keep his job. I'm pretty sure the Saints are trying to win. We know Darren Rizzi is trying to earn a job. So I think both teams are trying their hardest to win. I think we're going to see all the young guys inactive for the Saints still. We're not going to see them play all their young guys and try, So I guess both teams are motivated to win, but both teams are bad to start with and injured on top of that.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of, and I agree fully with firing the head coach when they fired him. But that is one of the downsides to firing your coach and going to the interim guy is that you can't go to him and kind of say, hey, bench everybody. We want to look at these guys and think about next year. And then come January 5th, whoops, you're out of a job.
Yeah.
So you could get a guy to buy into that is the coach in the idea that, like, okay, I got to do this to keep my job. You got an interim guy. He's fighting for his job. You can't tell him to play all the young guys and build for the future because he doesn't have a future. Yeah. So that is one of the downsides to that. Having said that, it absolutely had to be done. Dennis Allen had to go. They're in a better place for getting rid of him, and they're still losing. But, yeah, it's tough to kind of say, no, shut it down and look to next year. But in the way that they kind of are anyhow because of the injuries. The injuries have kind of taken care of 90% of that. I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, Derek Carr inactive, Alvin Kamara inactive, Chris Olave inactive feels like what you would do if you were tanking.
Eric McCoy, all that. So I don't even know who you want to see. Bub Means is the kind of the guy that I want to see, and his season's over. So I don't really know where you're looking for the young guys to go into this game. But, yeah, it's tough and it's bleak, man. This is probably the first game since I've covered the Saints. Not the first game, but this is the first stretch of games since I've covered the Saints where it's felt absolutely meaningless. And it's been a long time since it's been that bad, that bleak, this early in the season, going back a couple of weeks, even last week, the week before, even before they were eliminated. But this kind of feels like the realization of, like, oh, none of this matters anymore at all. Like, this is a futile waste of time. And it really feels like that right now, kind of.
100%. 100%. More than – and I agree. Like, even in all those 7-9 years, the NFC South was so bad that they were like, there was a 7-9 team that won it one year. Like, they were never mathematically out of it, so it added this weird element of, there is something at stake. There's no hint of anything at stake. There is nothing at stake. And the only thing that's less bleak is we're 2 weeks away from the coaching search and, like, actual change. Like, that's going to be energizing for this team is to actually make changes. We just hope they're pretty big. From a game standpoint, one name I'm interested to see, they promoted Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I don't know how much he's going to play,
I heard
but
he's
that's
gonna have- I heard he's
somebody
gonna
they're
play a lot.
evaluating for the future.
I've heard he's going to play a lot.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have a real role. I think he's just probably their best third down back right now. Like I think he's their best player. Like he's Jordan Mims is someone they've been kind of liking but trying to move away from throughout the season, and I think Clyde coming in was a direct shot at his stability and then elevating him. I think also lends to that. Going back though, the 7 and 9 years, like it even felt different then though because you still had Drew Brees in his prime, and it felt like you were building towards something at least. Even as it was like asked, it's like how are they going to get better for next year? It doesn't feel like they're building toward anything at all right now. It just kind of feels like you're spinning the wheels, and it's just when are they going to actually just let it go off the cliff? And is it going to be a longer
Sean
game
Payton
of chicken or not?
Famously, had that sideline photo that included Howley Kakaha. I don't remember who else was in it, but he was talking about how energized he was by these young guys on the sideline, all in, and he thought about a future. That didn't end up being true. Not a lot of those guys ended up being very good, but they were talking about the future. This team is not talking about the future. They're playing their old guys. They're not playing their young guys. Their young guys aren't any good. I mean, other than Kool-Aid McKinstry and Alante Taylor are the two we've talked a lot about. Tali Fuaga and Trevor Penning we've talked a lot about. But other than a handful of guys, it doesn't even feel like this is a young team that's building toward 2025.
Who are you wanting to see, though? Who are the young guys that they would play?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. They don't even have him on the roster. I mean, I want Christian Boyd out there. I want Isaiah Foskey. I mean, I'm totally done with the 2024 Saints. They just don't think that way.
I guess I've just moved on from a lot. I don't think Isaiah Foskey's part of anything. I don't think Anthony Orgy's taking a linebacker spot from anybody.
Yeah.
I don't think
You're right.
Christian Boyd might be, but I don't think he's ready yet.
Yeah.
I'm not throwing the towel in on him. I just don't think that those guys they don't deserve to play.
Yeah.
They don't I just don't see hey, let's see what we got with them. I think you kind of know that, and I think that's the big problem with the team right now. Going to our chat, taking a question from Q Main. He says, I'm not taking up for Dennis Allen. People were so ready for him to leave, but the defense still cannot tackle. What can they do to improve that next season? It's a baffling issue to me. I don't understand why they can't tackle. Ball population is really not there the way it should be, but they still can't tackle, and it's across the board. Something fundamentally has to change. I would be interested in doing a study, though, between tackling over the last 5 years versus back when they could still actually practice in training camp and see what the missed tackle numbers are. I would bet it's kind of an epidemic across the league a little bit, but it's especially bad here. And I think it's a couple things. I think it's, I think one of the issues is having slow players. You're late getting to the ball, so you're lunging where if you had younger, faster players, you're meeting them at the point and actually making a tackle attempt in the hole instead of being a half step out of position and trying to dive and grab legs. I think that's a big part of it. And B, I think there's just something fundamentally wrong with kind of how they went about things.
I'm sure those are both correct, slow players and not getting enough practice. I also think there is an element, I don't know if it's 5% or 50% of feeling defeated. I feel like they always say tackling is about will and want to. And, I mean, look at the games we're talking about. Losing 34-0 to the Packers, losing 51 to whatever to the Buccaneers, 30-something to 3 to the Broncos or whatever those scores were. We just saw a team that was how soon can we get off this field? And I think sometimes that shows out in tackling more than anywhere else.
Sticking with the chat, Misplaced Saint asks, there is a lot of blame placed on Mickey Loomis for the state of the team, but I was a fan for many years of a dominant football team. Can Loomis be in charge of a full rebuild and not just kicking the can down the road?
Yeah, I think he can. The question is, will he be motivated to do it? I mean, I think this was a chosen path that the Saints followed to try and be a 10-win team that could take advantage of a horrible NFC South. I think if they were healthy, they could have been a 10-win team taking advantage of a horrible South. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are playing out what the Saints wanted to be the last 3 years, and they failed to do that. So that was a wrong decision. Signing Derek Carr turned out was a wrong decision. They've also failed at their draft choices. So they've made a lot of wrong choices. But I don't think that fundamentally means they will never try to rebuild. They will never try to get younger. They will never try to assemble draft picks. I mean, they did in 06. They did in 17. So we've seen them do it before. I don't know if he's just fundamentally opposed to ever going young and taking a couple years to rebuild and hiring coaches willing to do it. that's what we're going to find out this offseason. If they don't take that approach, then I'll be really disturbed.
I mean, they tore it down over 15 and 16.
Yeah.
So, like, there was a willingness to do it. I think a lot of it's going to have to do with the next coach and what he wants to do. And I think one of the misplaced perceptions about Mickey, like, Mickey does support his coach. Like, he'll do what his coach wants. And that's kind of how the team's typically built. I think he took more of a front seat approach with Dennis Allen, whereas he was in the back seat, I think, with Sean Payton. But if they get the right coach and they start having success, Mickey's going to fall back on it. But is he capable of doing it? I think the blind faith of anything with this franchise at this point has to be proven to me now.
Yeah.
Whereas in 15, it was like, yeah, they'll be able to rebuild it.
Yeah.
You kind of had that blind faith, but they've lost the trust of it because they haven't made the playoffs in 4 years. So I think it's in a prove it territory now. Yeah, they got to figure it out. I mean, can he do it? Yeah, he could, but you got to show it. You really got to show it. And I don't think anyone should have faith in anything they're doing right now because they kind of feel a little bit directionless. And then in this rebuild, I feel like the biggest issue with it was the half measure of we're going to get Derek Carr and we're going to try to win, but we aren't going to spend the money to win around him. And it's like, well, great. It's great you're taking care of the cap, but then why did you spend the $40 million over here on the QB? It's either spend the $40 million on the QB and build around him and keep kicking the can, or don't spend the $40 million on the QB and take care of the cap. But I think trying to do both at the same time is a fruitless
endeavor.
They're
trying to thread a very, very thin needle,
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think the thread doesn't fit the needle is the problem. Like, if you're going to try to do both, don't go out and get the 15th highest paid quarterback in the league. Shop in the 25 range where you're spending $8 million a year instead of 30. Take care of the cap. Hope you catch fire, and maybe you start your rebuild that way. But I just think it kind of takes away from all of it, and then you don't have the depth, and you get hurt, and your team's screwed once it gets hurt. Or you don't get the third wide receiver, and you can't move the ball because you have two smaller guys burning down the field, and you don't have anyone that can get open on third down. The ideals of it just never meshed. And I think if you're going to do a rebuild, you need to have a clear-eyed vision and be all in on one direction and not be trying to drive down two lanes of the road, because at some point you're going to careen and crash, and here's the crash. And we're in it right now.
Although I will say one thing that I said, I was even less into I remember we had a famous argument about not signing Jimmy Garoppolo, and then I convinced myself that Carr was a little more upper tier. But all along I was like, go ahead and do this, knowing that the fallback plan is if this doesn't work, your 33-year-old Derek Carr, his contract's going to be coming up at the same time that DeMario and Cam are 35 and Tyler. And like the obvious conclusion is, all right, you've got 2 years to try this, and if it doesn't work, that means you have no choice but to rebuild. I feel like now we've hit no choice but to rebuild status with this team. We'll just see if they actually agree with that. I hope they do.
Well, the problem with that approach, though, is when they signed him, they said he's not the savior and all that stuff, and then you treat him like he's Drew Brees and he's going to elevate the offense, and he didn't elevate the offense. So why did you go get him? Like, if you're going to get Derek Carr, you have to say, okay, he's not going to make our tight end that's a converted UDFA wide receiver into a viable tight end, so let's go get a real tight end. He's not going to make A.T. Perry into a viable third wide receiver. We need to get a real wide receiver over here. We can't go ass on the offensive line and try to piece it together because he panics in the pocket and doesn't protect himself, so we need to make sure this is the pocket. So if you go get Derek Carr, like, you can't buy a Porsche and not put 93 gas in it. It's not going to run.
Let me remind you that same year they traded away several future drafts to add Chris Olave and Trevor Penning, so it all worked.
But you got to spend the money. You can't just get one guy and say, well, he's going to make A.T. Perry better, and then if it doesn't work, Cedric Wilson. Like, that doesn't work. You have Derek Carr. You got to support him. You got to put everything around him because he's not Drew Brees. He's not elevating your team, and that's the whole problem with the whole approach. So if you're lacking faith in a rebuild, it's because they didn't do what they needed to do here. And I think that's the biggest issue with the team. It's not that you went and got Derek. It's that you got Derek and you thought that he was somebody else, and he wasn't. And they had clear eyes when they did it, but then they didn't act on what they saw. And I think it's a huge that's the issue with the team to me, is that you got him and went cheap, and that doesn't make sense. Like, he's not a good enough quarterback to elevate. Oh, we got Derek, now we can rebuild and maybe make the playoffs. That isn't – it was never going to be that. We'll talk about that for the next 6 months. TD Scoop asks, what is it, the top of your wish list for this upcoming offseason? A good coach. A good coach.
I mean, it has to start with that. A good plan. How about a good plan?
A good plan.
I'm not – look, I'm online and I listen to our readers, and I reply to them on Twitter. I see them in our comments. I understand everyone in the front office doesn't know what they're doing, and they all need to be out of here. I don't know that I share that sentiment, but I know that they need to prove those people wrong. They need to show that they actually have a good plan for what's next, and it cannot be the same plan that we've seen the last 3 years. That plan has to be thrown out. It has to be burned to the ground. That plan of staying competitive throughout this, through half measures, has to be thrown out completely.
Yeah, they got to go a little bit harder. It could even be like this division is bad enough that it can be a 75% measure. Like, if they built their offense and they're like, okay, we can't afford a tight end and a wide receiver, but we're going to get one. All right, cool. We can't afford a tackle and a guard and this other tackle, so we're going to draft a tackle and sign one guy and try to cheaply piece together the other. Cool. But you can't say we're going to draft one, flip him to the other side of the line, pray to God that Trevor Penning works, and hope that there's an option at guard out of the bargain bin. Like, I understand that the people putting the team together are operating within, kind of what they're allowed to do and what the budget is, but it needed to be a little bit. It just needed to be a little bit more, and it just wasn't quite there. And then your depth erodes and all that. But yeah, it has to be a plan. Like, there has to be this is how we're going to do it. Yeah. These are the pieces we're going to put together. This is the coach we're going to get. Okay, our quarterback isn't good enough. How are we going to make him better? We're getting him out of here and starting over. Like, it needs to be one or the other at this point. I think they're at a very big crossroads. And man, I pray to God this isn't the feeling right now. This isn't the conversation before the next 5 years.
I don't want them spending $40 million on Derek Carr this year. I honestly think I'm in the top 1% of probably Derek Carr supporters left in the world, because I don't think he's that bad. I think he's the 22nd, 25th best quarterback in the league. I think he's in the Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith tier. But if the Saints wanted to pay any of those guys $40 million, I would stand on a table and scream, "Are you crazy? Don't spend $40 million on a fourth-tier quarterback in the NFL," because the fifth tier is free. Andy Dalton is free. Sam Darnold was free this year. Baker Mayfield was free 2 years ago. $40 million to be one tier above $8 million is insane for a team that has the biggest cap problem in the league and needs to rebuild for a couple years.
Yeah, or if you're keeping Derek Carr, you need to just own it and make that your plan and go in on it and give him all the stuff. But otherwise, if you aren't going to do that, move on.
Yeah.
Like, move on and do it right now, because it's not going to work. The only way it can work is if you can't go get a Craig Sager suit and try to act humble about how you're dressed. You know what I mean? Like, you just got to walk around like you're that dude at that point. And if Derek Carr's your quarterback, do everything around him or move on. But don't try to okay, we're going to get Dante Pettis is going to be our third wide receiver. Like, no, man, go get all the pieces and try to make it work or move on. Like, it has to be one or the other. It can't be the half measure of it.
Well, you were a little I think this franchise was a little torn when they still had prime Alvin Kamara, prime DeMario Davis, Cam Jordan, Michael Thomas, and Ryan Ramczyk were still on the team. I think the team was a little more torn when that was the nucleus of this team. That is not the nucleus of the team right now. There's nothing that should make you think we're good right now.
I agree, but I think they should move on. I'm just saying if they stick with this path, then own it and make it your path. Don't try to split the middle. Yeah. And because all that's going to happen is even if you make the playoffs, you're just going to suck a year from now. It just doesn't – it doesn't –
We've hit a year from now. We finally hit a year from now.
Yeah.
It's now.
Yeah. Division still sucks. There's a way to win it, but, don't chase that anymore. Yeah, that's no longer a viable – it's over, because if you don't hit it, this is the flip side of it. So aim higher, so if you miss it, you're the Bengals and you're still right there and you feel good about where you're at least. All right, what's the next one? The Saints currently have 8 draft picks. How many picks do you think they'll wind up making? How many should they make? I hope they make all the high ones they have. And if you're trading up in the later rounds, whatever. But
how about this? We've been talking about how we know what Mickey Loomis is, and he's only one way, and he doesn't do anything. How about, here's what I want to see. Trade down for the first time in 20 years just to prove that the reality is different than it's been in 20 years.
Yeah.
Once. Just do it once, just to show things aren't going to work the way they've always worked around here.
Symbolic.
Symbolic gesture. Trade down 2 months before the draft like you traded up 2 months before the draft a couple of years ago.
Is there any backup or practice squad player you think should get an expanded look in the last 2 weeks? I don't. There's nobody I'm really.
I'm interested in seeing Clyde. I mean, it's something. Yeah. Something new to look at today.
Yeah, I mean, there's nobody that I really feel like knocking down a door. And look, I mean, a lot of the guys that we would have said have gotten elevated due to injury.
Yeah, Kool-Aid would have been number one on my list if he wasn't forced into the starting role. He would have been a guy I was dying to see play every snap, and that happened to this team already halfway through the season.
What are the chances Gail Benson will take a leading role in the next head coach search? I recognize she isn't a football savant, though she is an entrepreneur and had success in her career. She clearly knows what leadership looks like. She should be highly involved. Will she take a lead and look to move toward a generation of creative leaders? I think that she'll obviously have a say in the opinions, but I think she's deferring to the people that she's put in power to make those decisions. I think that's how that probably ends up playing out.
I think so, too. I mean, I don't hate the model of an owner putting like sort of a football operations president type of person in charge. I would like to think that Mickey Loomis, if he thought it was the best thing for the team, would be willing to hire his version of Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes and empower them. So I'm curious to see that too. A lot of this stuff, I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see if they're willing to do it a different way, but I don't know yet.
My guess is if Mickey were ever to take a step back, I think it would probably be for some of the people that he's already put around him.
Fair.
Like he's got Dave Ziegler up there, former GM. I don't think it'd be Randy Mueller, but he's up there. Michael Parrington's up there. He's somebody that's probably going to be a GM in the league someday. I think it would be one of those types of people that are kind of already in the mix, and that's probably how it would look. The Ziegler thing was very interesting to me when they brought him in. I don't know. Like, we need to ask more about him during the offseason. I don't know exactly everything he does here. He's been around some this season. We've seen him around. He was the former Raiders GM. I think he still kind of lives out there and does scouting from out there. But
Patriots under Belichick for a long time before that.
Yeah. So I think, that's always something that's interested me. And I always wondered if Mickey was kind of looking down the road to see, like, all right, let me see if there's something here with these guys or something. Like, I don't really understand. It might just be getting more brain power in the room. Like, I don't know. Like, but it was interesting to me this offseason when he hired him on full time. Kind of wondering what the vision was there. Anything you're looking for in this game?
Rattler. I hope Rattler shows us a little more of Washington. Rattler. I'm not going to come to any convicted opinions on Rattler, no matter what happens for the rest of this season. He's going to have a full off season for me to form my opinion on him. But I hope that we feel good about Rattler as a developmental quarterback, that we're excited to watch in OTAs and minicamp. So I hope he's just good enough for us to still look forward to watching him in OTAs and minicamp.
Yeah, it's all Rattler for me. That's really kind of the only thing I really got my eyes on today. I just want to see him put something together that you kind of feel like there's optimism around him. I don't think that we've seen a real fair performance to judge him on yet. There's been no blocking in pretty much every game he's played. There's been no wide receivers now. I'd have to check this, but I would be willing to place a small bet, and I'm probably wrong because it's 4 games now, but I'd be willing to bet. Has he been the leading rusher in every game he started?
Oh, my God.
It's very possible. So I'm not going to look up.
He played with Alvin, so no way, right?
And maybe, I don't know, the offensive line was
so he started 4 games. I'm going to bet just twice. That's going to be my guess.
Keep
Definitely
talking. I'm going to look it up. Right. I'm going to look it up.
I'm trying to think what, like, defending Brock Bowers, defending Jacoby Myers. Could we feel better about Kool-Aid McKinstry and Alontae Taylor? I quietly think they kind of did okay against the Packers. As terrible as that game went, Jordan Love was holding on to the ball a lot, and those were not 2 guys that he picked on. They picked on just about every other part of the Saints defense. So I guess that anything that makes me feel better about Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry over the last 2 weeks is something else to watch if you're grasping for straws. And Tali Fuaga and Trevor Penning those are the big 4 to me. Those are Brian Brzee, can he get to his 10 sacks? Cam Jordan, can he get closer to his 130 sacks? I guess there's little things to cheer for while you're taking down the Christmas decorations and putting this game on in the background.
Super wrong on that, but not by a ton. Against the Bucks, Alvin had 40 yards. Rattler had 27. So, no running game there. No running game in that game. Against the Broncos, Kendrick Miller led with 36 yards. Rattler had 34.
Oh, so close.
So, no running game in that game. Granted, because they got smoked, but The Chargers.
I feel like the spirit of what you guessed was right.
Alvin, or he got benched in that game. Yeah, I mean, just
it's tough for you when people don't give you the answers ahead of time.
He hasn't had yeah. And then last week, obviously, he led in that game.
He definitely led in that game.
But again, yeah, I mean, it's part of that due to an ineptness of. But yeah, I mean, he hasn't had a lot of running game. He hasn't had good blocking. He hasn't had wide receivers.
Let's talk about Kendre Miller real quick because we think Clyde's going to get a lot of work. Does Kendre need a redemption last 2 weeks of the season very bad to keep him from almost to keep his future intact?
Well, no, because there's going to be a new coach. Like, he's going to be evaluated by new people. Yeah. But he needs to show that he can line up correctly. And that's a huge issue. I mean, you can get an associate's degree in 2 years. He's been here for 2 years. You should be able to line up at this point. And granted, they changed the offense and everything, but you need to be able to know, there's some very egregious stuff on stuff that, we can watch and say, oh, my God, he's lined up wrong here. So there's probably, for every instance we can spot, there's probably 10 things he's doing wrong that we can't spot. A split's messed up. If somebody's not redirecting him, it's kind of very hard to tell, something's broken, or if you don't have two guys running her out to the same spot. But there's a lot of protection issues. So he just needs to show that he can conquer a game plan, because if he can't, it's going to be an issue next year too. So between now and July, May, whatever it is, OTAs, he needs to show that he knows how to line up correctly.
All right, so we got Rattler, we got Kendre, we got Fuaga and Penning, we got Brzee to an extent, we've got Kool-Aid and Alante. Is anybody else using these last 2 weeks to help showcase whether they should be a part of this team next year? Werner's already a part of the team next year no matter what. Cesar Ruiz is probably already a part of the team next year no matter what. Foster and Jawan. Jawan's a free agent. I mean, there's so much on those guys already that there's not a lot more they can tell us, I don't think.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. Again, because there's going to be a new staff, and I don't think it's going to be evaluated over the course of the whole body of work. So it's not like you can build momentum with your coach and be like, you know what I mean?
I really like what he. I think Kendre can though. He will be evaluated by a new staff. But if Kendre has a good last 2 weeks and starts to clean up some of that stuff, starts to get some of his confidence back, I think that would be important. I want him to be an important part of this.
I think he'll be in camp next year no matter what, though. Yeah, I mean, there's some guys like that are going to get cut before then. I don't think anyone's changing their fate over the next 2 weeks with any of that stuff. Going to read off the inactives here, and then we're going to get out of here. Derek Carr inactive. Jordan Mims will be inactive, so Clyde's going to have a big role today. Alvin Kamara's inactive. I think he plays next week. Anthony Orgy's inactive. Mason Tipton.
There's a guy who doesn't get to audition for next year.
John Ridgway. I think this is the end of the road for him. Yeah. John Ridgway inactive. Christian Boyd inactive. So that's
Boyd's a guy I'd play. Out of all these guys, Boyd's the guy who should be getting playing time in these games. That's a mistake, I think.
All right.
But it shows they're trying to win.
Yep.
That's evidence this team is trying to win this game.
He's the only one. He's the only one that I'm like, damn, I would have liked to see him play. I guess he's the only one on that list that I would like to see out there. But if they feel like he can't help with the run defense, he really must not be ready because the barrier to entry is super duper low right now. That's going to do it for us on this pregame show presented by Matt Bowers. If you're in the market for a new car, go buy one of them. His cars will never disappoint you. This team might. We're going to find out how it goes today. We'll have the live blog on NewOrleans.Football. Make sure you signed up for that. We'll have a post-game show a couple hours after the game. We'll have all the analysis on this game, commentary on it, so much more following the game. And make sure you're locked in for the offseason. Next week, Sunday, we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to be live streaming the game, kind of having a little watch party. Mike's going to be out in Tampa covering the game live. So make sure you're looking out for that. Going to see if there's anything there, and if it's a cool thing to do, we'll evaluate it over the offseason. But yeah, that's it. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.